and this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as the Mad Painter, and we are on Revolution Radio Studio B. And today our very special guest is Daniel Pinchbeck. And we're going to be talking about a new book called The Occult Control System, UFOs, Aliens, Other Dimensions, and Future Timelines. So all of a sudden, the mainstream media has turned its focus on the subject of UFOs, a global phenomenon that they had derided and dismissed until now. The tone has shifted drastically in recent articles in the New York Times. The article is called, Wow, What is That? Navy Pilots Report Unexplained Flying Objects. And the Washington Post has an article, UFOs Exist and Everyone Needs to Adjust to That Fact. So partly due to Unidentified, a new series on the History Channel, these things are coming about. The series exhaustively chronicles military encounters with what appears to be a diverse alien craft. So the Times reports on myriad anomalies encountered by pilots as recently as 2015, including an object akin to a spinning top moving against the wind and another like a sphere encasing a cube. These objects accelerate to hypersonic speeds, make sudden stops and instantaneous turns with no visible engine or exhaust plumes. For some conspiracy theorists, the new spate of articles suggests that we are approaching a threshold of disclosure, the long-awaited release of withheld information on UFOs and ETs. Others suspect that this partial disclosure is orchestrated by intelligence agencies whose motives remain opaque and unclear. So Daniel, I've got a longer bio and lots of pictures of Daniel Pinchbeck on aquariumradio.com. I invite you to go over there and check it out. Dr. Lessin, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hello.
Can you hear me,
yes,
Janet?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
Very
excellent.
good.
Daniel, I'm really glad to have you on the program. You know, I was into your seminal articles on the coming New Age, December 21st, 2012, because I'm a student of Zachariah Sitchin's in the Maya, who we've translated this stuff, where Kuku Klan, or Ningishita, as we call him, said, "I'm coming back with 9 gods and gods, other Anunnaki, to clean up this mess that we left here." And it was when that December 21st time is when all the we lined up with the galactic core, and what that meant is that was the beginning of the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And what I found out is there's a lot of junk happening, but there is, for a lot of us, that's exactly what happened. We did enter that, and we know already that one of the things that was done is A.R. Borden said we got moved out of the way of Nibiru as it came through. And it's just like, yes, Daniel, it's really right on. I think that what happened, the Mandela effect can be accounted for by this and everything. Some of us really did move into the age of Aquarius.
Sasha, you're coming in a little bit. You're coming in a little bit garbled. If you could shut off one or two of your other computers, it'd be great. We'll have more bandwidth.
They're all off. They're all off, Janet. All the other
good.
They're all off.
It's just warbling. Okay. Welcome to our show, Daniel. It's such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us about your what brought you, what draw you into this arena, into this field, which you weren't really talking about on this level before, although you touched on it in 2012, the return of Quetzalcoatl.
Well, yeah, but actually I wrote about alien abductions and crop circles, quite extensively in 2012.
Okay.
I spent a whole summer back in like 2000, I think it was 2002 or 2003, living in England in Glastonbury, and I was visiting the crop circles when they appeared every morning. And as one of the other guys who just spoke, although it was a little bit hard to understand him, was saying that I wrote a book called 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, where I was looking at the kind of ideas around transformation that many indigenous cultures have, who've kind of looked towards this time as a time of profound transformation on the planet. And that actually dovetailed with the messages that many researchers had encountered in these formations that appear mysteriously in England, these huge patterns that appear in these fields. So yeah, I got very into the subject, and I wrote about the alien abduction stories, and tried to kind of so in a way that this new book, The Occult Control System, is a kind of a continuation of that thought stream and that research, and really trying to create a larger container or different approaches for us to understand something that's so confusing and ineffable.
Right, and I just wanted to give you a little further background. That's my husband, Dr. Sasha Lessin, and he studied with, he knew Terence McKenna very well. Terence has been to our house here in Maui, and he and Dr. Lessin's former wife, Joan, had gone over and visited Terence at his place on the Big Island many times. And then also Sasha, Dr. Lessin, studied with Stan Groff, and he and John Mack, which, was... he started doing the research with experiencers back in the early 2000s, late 1990s, and so on. They studied together in the second certification program under Stan Groff, working with holotropic breathwork and LSD psychotherapy. So that's just kind of, we kind of tie into each other in many ways here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
sure.
Sasha, maybe if you slow down a little, because you were a little bit warm, it might just be the Skype.
Okay.
What would you like to?
Okay, there's a few things. One, subjectively, Daniel, I felt like I had at December 21st, 2012, just as Kuku Klan or Ningishita predicted, felt there was a change as we aligned with the galactic center and Susie Hansen says a lot of us who have genes that have been suppressed or subpersonalities that haven't fully come out, we can feel the pull that something has changed so drastically that we stepped into the Aquarian age and we're filled with love for everybody and everything. And it's happened to many people, but not to everybody here. It's like we entered parallel timelines. And so some people in this reality seem to be really in the Aquarian age, and some of them are still stuck in the Kali Yuga. And so I actually love what you wrote. It really helped me understand what was happening.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, ideas. You just presented a lot of different ideas, all kind of mixed together. And, yeah, I mean, in my work as a thinker, I've been trying to kind of, bring some, clarity and reason and, very much also kind of like make distinctions between, when we're theorizing or hypothesizing and, what we actually know and what we kind of believe and what we think and so on. But, no, I appreciate if my work, helps you to, see the situation in a different way or in a new way.
Yeah, it really, it suggests, even its suggestion, that one, get the bigger picture. And let's say that you just put out a hypnotic suggestion in your book. If that's all it is, it's still very cool because it makes me happy.
So, since I don't know if you've been on Revolution Radio before, but even our show is a different audience. Can you give us a little bit of the background on who you are and your research, and tell us what this book is about from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've written a number of books. My first book was called Breaking Open the Head, or is called, and that came out in 2002. And that book was on psychedelic shamanism. And it was came out from Random House, and it was probably one of the a relatively important book in terms of reopening the cultural conversation around psychedelics and shamanism and the visionary experience, because as we all know, the visionary plants and psychedelic chemicals were really repressed and made illegal in the late 60s, even though before then many scientists and psychologists and researchers had felt they were the most valuable tools for exploring the human psyche that we'd ever discovered. But when the 60s happened, and it was a period of great social unrest and turmoil and questioning and so on, the establishment became very scared of the impact of the psychedelic experience on people. And so they made all the substances very illegal. They made them Schedule 1. And so from the 60s until the last 10 years, we lost like a whole generation of research and study and knowledge. And now we're in a period where we're rebuilding that knowledge. And I think Breaking Open the Head was helpful because I started as a skeptic from the mainstream, as a writer for the New York Times and Rolling Stone and Esquire. And I really described step by step how, by going through these different experiences, my worldview shifted, how I began to have more synchronicities and more psychic experiences, and I began to look at the world in a very different way. That led to my second book, which I mentioned earlier, 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl. That book was a bestseller in 2007, and I was really looking at indigenous knowledge systems, indigenous wisdom, trying to correlate what these ancient cultures say about the time that we're in with everything that we see happening around us, whether it's the ecological crisis or whether it's the rapid evolution of technology or sort of geopolitical issues that are happening. And in that book I also explored kind of occult ideas, metaphysical ideas, Gurdjieff, Rudolf Steiner, Carl Jung, philosophy, physics, and so on. And then I wrote then I started a company called Evolver that had a web magazine, Reality Sandwich, and it was edited some anthologies, but it was quite a while until I published my third book, How Soon Is Now, which came out in 2017 from Watkins. And that book actually looks at the ecological crisis as a kind of rite of passage or a collective initiation for humanity. One theme in my books has been kind of initiation, the fact that modern civilization forfeited these rites of passage or initiation that we find in traditional societies all over the world. And in that book, I also consider, what we would do if we were to have a collective awakening or a mass awakening. How would we actually deal with the ecological damage that we've created? How can we change direction before it's too late? And I look at the social, political, and technological aspects of that. This year I've had a few books come out. One of them is on the global spread of ayahuasca. That book actually just came out a week or so ago. It's called When Plants Dream, Ayahuasca, Amazonian Shamanism, and the Global Psychedelic Renaissance. So in that book, we really look at all the facets of ayahuasca, which I'm sure your readers know, but just in case they don't, ayahuasca is an Amazonian medicine, a visionary potion made from two plants brewed together, the ayahuasca vine, Metasteriopsis caapi, and the Psychotria viridis, which contains dimethyltryptamine or DMT, which is a very powerful psychoactive or psychedelic substance that we actually also produce in our brains naturally. And but generally, if you eat DMT, it doesn't have any effect because your enzymes in your stomach neutralize it. When you drink it as part of the ayahuasca potion, there are chemicals in the vine, beta-carbolines, that allow the DMT to be orally active. So then you can have visions and incredible experiences with that medicine, which is really used by hundreds of tribes throughout the Amazon basin. So that book came out, and then this summer, really inspired by all of these incredible new reports of UFOs and the way the mainstream media had suddenly shifted its perspective, I wrote the Occult Control System. What I've been aware of for a long time is that if you don't really have a reasonable way of understanding something or thinking about something, most people can't even really fathom it or have a way of thinking about what's happening. So I felt that with the Occult Control System, I was seeking to give a new frame for the UFO and alien experience so that people could understand it differently and integrate what's happening.
So when people do shamanistic experiences, a lot of them report encountering extraterrestrials. Have you made a correlation between what happens when we open portals using psychedelics and DMT and things, and perhaps the ways that extraterrestrials are traveling between the dimensions?
Well, yeah, I mean, people report encountering all sorts of beings in visionary states, and some of them, seem like they're maybe from other realities or other dimensions or other worlds. And yeah, I mean, some of those types of encounters seem quite similar to, what people say they encounter in these, abduction experiences and so on. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of correlation, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What is the occult control system? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the book, I explore some ideas from the philosophy of Gnosticism. And the Gnostics were kind of knowledge holders of the ancient knowledge of the pagan world. And they had a whole belief system that the world we experience is actually kind of like a matrix. A little bit like the movie The Matrix, actually. And there are beings who kind of like try to control humanity and divert us from our true, authentic spiritual nature and our evolutionary path. And for the Gnostics, for instance, they thought Christianity and monotheism, as it developed, was actually an intentional deviation that these archons, as they're called, had prepared to kind of trick humanity into accepting a degraded way of being and living, rather than kind of inspiring us to seek knowledge for ourselves. You can make a distinction between the exoteric and the esoteric. The kind of other directed nature of religions, which are actually codes of behavior, where the priests are supposed to hold all the spiritual knowledge, and esoteric traditions like shamanism and Gnosticism, where if you want the knowledge, you have to go through initiation for yourself, and nobody else can really no other knowledge but the knowledge that you acquire can ultimately be meaningful for you. So this idea that there's some kind of a control system that's orchestrated from these hidden or subtle dimensions of reality, and looking at like the alien abduction narrative, how strange these entities are that proliferate in these accounts, how they really don't seem to have our best interests at heart. It suggests that maybe there's a plan or a strategy or a scheme where they're seeking to lure us into kind of a trap in a way, to make use of our energies in different ways.
That's an interesting analogy. We actually work with hundreds, if not thousands, of experiencers and contactees, especially in the show here. We interview people all the time. So there is a faction that has the negative experiences, and there's a faction that have positive experiences. They find themselves ambassadors and engaging with the part of the continuum that wishes us well and helps us to grow and evolve, become conscious, and eventually invited to join like the Federation of Planets. Have you had any, since you've done, shamanic work and obviously done a lot of research, have you personally had any kind of experiences, non-ordinary states experiences or paranormal experiences that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, I've had many. I haven't, had like abductions where I've been physically taken, anywhere like that. My experiences have been a little bit subtler, and I'm a little cautious in talking about them because I don't always necessarily feel they convey very well just in ordinary speech. But one of the most profound experiences I had was more of a kind of experience of receiving a transmission or channeling, where while I was writing the book 2012. And I was in the Amazon in Brazil working with a religion called Santo Daime that uses ayahuasca as its sacrament. For about a week, I felt that I was in communion with a kind of super sensible being that actually introduced itself to me as Quetzalcoatl and explained that I was an avatar of Quetzalcoatl, meant to kind of help bring this new energy into manifestation. And also explain that we were indeed in the time of the, apocalypse, a word that truly means revealing or uncovering, and kind of said that we were in this this liminal zone between realities, between dimensions, and that we had choices to make in this period.
Well, I received similar information. I have downloads, and I've been told that I am a avatar or fractal of Ninmah. So Ninmah was the mother creator goddess, and Quetzalcoatl, another name for him is Negashita or Thoth or Thoth. And so he was the son of Enki. So you're getting back to the ancient gods, Sumerian and Anunnaki. So that's interesting. So I've always been wanting to meet an emanation of Quetzalcoatl or Thoth, and I kept saying, we keep meeting all the Marduks and the Yankees and the Inanas and everything, and so it's interesting that that's the download that you're getting. So a lot of people get this information, and they identify with one of the gods or goddesses or the archetypes. Anyway, I just wanted to add that. Sasha, what do you want to add?
Well, it's a very nice exposition. I find that people resonate so that whatever's happening here and now has resonances in the person's childhood, in their past life ideation, in their ideas, if the fiction they like, the books they might think about. it's like we are themic and we're run by our needs, and some of them are conscious and some of them are unconscious. And the ones that are unconscious, we project on others as though there is another that's separate from us. But in one sense, we can look at ourselves in interaction with everything, forming a system. And so we all have fractals, and the whole is in some way orchestrated in a systematic way. I think that's the only conclusion you can have about why things seem to work out as they do. And that's my way of looking at it. And so it's you don't need to unduly worry about the ontological reality status of a person's projections, but just accept them as symbols that the person has as their symbols and dig it and see what they learn from it. That's what I think.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yes. So then you were talking about the matrix, and a lot of the researchers are looking at the this quantum reality as like a virtual reality, that we are on some level we're creating this this game that we're in. And so that's why we're actually choosers and we're not victims. And so when we're looking at, like you were talking about the archons, and even Star Trek had an episode called Return of the Archons. From your understanding, who and what are the archons? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more for us?
Well, I mean, I think so one thing that I really try to do is to be very careful, as I said, and make a distinction between, knowledge and myth and story. So, and I see these different, I think we have to be very, very careful not to overly reify, ideas and to look at different occult concepts as, kind of like reference points, or, I like, William Owen Thompson talks about them as almost like different, musical compositions, that give us access to different ways of looking at the nature of reality. I mean, according to the, Gnostic mythos, the original, reason for the Earth was there was a goddess in the Pluralma, which is the center of the galaxy, who began to have dreams of this beautiful blue planet, the Earth, the goddess Sophia. And finally, she was so enraptured by her dream that she forgot who she was, and she fell into material reality and out of the spirit realm, and she became the living Earth. And in that fall, it was such a dramatic event that it caused these kind of ruptures or ripples in the space-time firmament. And out of these ripples, these beings called the archons kind of emerged. So that's one way to kind of discuss it or articulate it. I mean, I look at a few different articulations in the book. The archons are an aspect of ourselves. They're a form that psychic energy has taken. They're, maybe higher dimensional, interdimensional, super sensible. They can take different, kind of roles in different times and places. For Rudolf Steiner, the founder of anthroposophy, he talked about some of these types of super sensible forces that work on humanity in different ways as the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic. And so for him, the Luciferic beings were, for Steiner, he sort of placed human evolution in a much larger kind of cosmic model, where we'd passed through these different stages, where we had 4 bodies, that we'd sort of acquired at different stages in Earth's evolution, and these had developed to a certain point. So there were all these other beings who were also evolving in different ways in other dimensions and other worlds. And they, in some ways, sometimes need us for their own evolution. So, for instance, for Steiner, these Luciferic beings are more evolved than us in many ways. They're super intelligent. They're incredibly creative and so on. But they're kind of stymied in their development unless they can kind of create an alliance or a relationship with a human vessel, who then helps them to evolve further by kind of forcing them to deal with the crud of the material plane and not only be in the sort of beauty and glamour of the astral plane. So that's how Steiner described these luciferic beings. And the Ahrimanic beings were more sort of satanic in a way. They're more kind of like, for Steiner, a power or a sort of community of entities who work together to pull us down towards minerality, materialism, sterility, cynicism, and kind of hyper material technologies. And Steiner actually thought that this Ahrimanic kind of force was ultimately going to make its appearance, incarnate in the human realm, just as God had incarnated in Christ 2,000 years ago. There would be a literal incarnation of Ahriman in the 21st century. He also said that the 21st century would be when humanity as a whole crosses the threshold into the spiritual worlds. And I think if we look at the saga of the Greys, who seem to be seeking to materialize in our reality directly, at the moment they're kind of on the edge of our reality, kind of like peeking in at us. Or if we look at the idea of artificial intelligence developing autonomy and self-will, those to me are both facets of this Ahrimanic incarnation that Steiner kind of warned us about.
Sasha, your turn.
I like.
You're breaking up again.
It's fun. Okay, in the Sitchin translations, the kind of thing he says is the person you're referring to as Lucifer is the chief scientist Enki, who created our race, and he created the Order of the Snake, a secret society to pass on the information. We are not gods. We're just people with technology. We know how to make genes, and you can figure it out too. And he conveyed this information to some people that turned out to be the Igigi, or the people that were allied with his son Marduk. Now, the son of Lucifer, or Enki, in the Sumerian stuff, is Prince Marduk, known as Ra, or Satan, and he winds up in charge of Earth after a lot of adventures. But there's many stories to account for the same thing, but it still comes down to these people had dominator and enslaved people and dissed women, and all these religions are based on that. And what you really have with the people like the Essenes is a breakaway from all that, and a return to the whole thing and how it all interacts, and the wholeness of everything. That's what it looks like to me.
You have a question for Daniel?
I want you to know, do you feel a change in consciousness that is positive? Is there something tangible that you're getting from all the places you've been and just in your being, Daniel?
That's a good question. I mean, I felt years ago that there maybe that also had to do with where I was at in my life and in my progress. I felt there was a positive movement towards consciousness. I still feel that's happening, but I'm I guess more pessimistic in a sense, because I feel when it comes particularly to the ecological crisis, we've moved too slow, and now it's really too late to prevent a lot of really, really terrible destruction. And it really makes me quite sad, actually, because I feel that in a way the Anglo-European world, which created industrialization and capitalism and this whole modern system, have kind of abdicated their responsibility to take care of the catastrophe that we've unleashed on the planet.
Great.
What would you have us do about it? What can be done about it? What do you think?
Well, one of the best movements that's happening right now is Extinction Rebellion, which is started in the UK, and there's chapters in the US. And essentially the idea is to create a nonviolent civil disobedience movement at a large scale, similar to what we saw with Gandhi in India or Martin Luther King in the 60s, that also, really has a number of, components to it. The idea is to force governments to reckon with the environmental crisis and to move much faster, to create large-scale mobilization around the environment, around climate, but also to make sure that we're not leaving behind the marginalized. So it has a social justice component, an indigenous rights component, and so on. It feels like something that's actually been very well thought through. And they had massive protests in London in April. Over 1,000 people got arrested. And right after that, the Parliament issued a climate emergency declaration. And in October, Extinction Rebellion is organizing events all around the world that anybody can participate in to move the needle further and force governments to really move faster and reckon with what's happening.
Are you still in New York? Are they having anything there? I'm in New York, but I'm not going to be here. I'm actually going with my girlfriend to Europe in a few days. But we're going to do the European march in a few weeks. Yeah, I think there's something coming up here in Maui, so I'm going to go participate in it. So it seems like people are waking up, and then there's a large faction that's unconscious all at the same time. And you mentioned earlier that, during the 60s we had this revelation and we were using entheogens. So people were waking up in mass, and then, of course, the government didn't want us to wake up, so they made it illegal. And so you said recently they've turned around and they're starting to do, I haven't really tracked it. I'm kind of want you guys to fill in the blanks. So they're starting to do trials and work with entheogens again. Is that true? MAPS?
It's absolutely amazing. Right, MAPS is a group started by this amazing man, Rick Doblin. It's a multidisciplinary association for psychedelic studies. There's Johns Hopkins has a new center for psychedelic research, the Imperial College in London. And, now ketamine, which is a form of kind of dissociative psychedelic, is now legally used for treating depression. MAPS is helping do phase 3 clinical trials on MDMA, which is also known as ecstasy, as a treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. And they've been finding a 60% cure rate with veterans from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars who have treatment-averse forms of PTSD. Similarly, ayahuasca is proving to be very powerful for PTSD. There's a movie called From Shock to Awe, which tracks some Iraq veterans who basically start taking ayahuasca, and after a little while, they're able to just throw away all of the, synthetic drugs from the pharmaceutical companies and so on. So, the Imperial College has been also doing brain scans of people on high-dose psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin and DMT, and then you can see how these compounds affect the brain, how they make all these different areas of the brain that are often dormant, very active, and how they create new patterns of connection in between these areas, which really supports a lot of the anecdotal, research around psychedelics as, incredible tools for creative thought and problem solving and so on.
Great. So, to me, it seems like part of this problem is because we are so unconscious. And the more people that can do things, I'm not saying everybody go out and do the psychedelics, but somehow move past this 3D reality, which keeps us locked in materialism and separate, feeling separate into things that unify consciousness and make us think outside of the box and think about, like you mentioned your timelines. You said, what is this called? Other dimensions and future timelines. So what do you mean by that? Are you able to somehow project what's going down into the future timelines? But what do you mean by future timelines in your title there?
Well, I'm intrigued by different strains of esoteric thought that actually suggest that there are multiple branching timelines, and and then if we think about if let's say, we're able to move through space and we live in this kind of linear projection of time, that we can't, kind of see beyond. But if there were beings that existed, maybe super sensible beings that existed at another dimension of space-time, they would actually be able to perceive time differently. And in the same way we can move through space, they can move through time. So it may be that these beings are actually orchestrating our timeline towards different outcomes that they prefer, that they want.
Yeah, I'm actually an experiencer. When I was 4, I was taken on board a ship and shown 24 different future timelines and potentialities. When I was there, I was my eternal self. Like I was outside of my 4-year-old, fractal self of who I am as an eternal being. And so they treated me like that. Like it wasn't just like a 4-year-old child. They treated me like an equal. And so they showed me in quick succession how the outcomes were of these 24 timelines. The worst case scenario was, like you said, very sad. Humanity destroyed the Earth, and we actually blew it up. And they had some variations on this theme all the way over to humanity was survived, but went into a higher level of consciousness, and we had these utopian realities. And then when they were done showing them, of course, I was just so emotional, and I was crying, and they asked me, which one do you choose? And I said, me choose, yeah. So we're all choosers, and so I chose the third one from the utopian end because I wanted something left to do, and then they returned me. So, my story is similar to many other experiencers that we are shown various timelines. So I think you're really accurate on describing the other dimensions of future timelines. What was your source of information on?
What's my? I mean, I'm a researcher, so I kind of was correlating. That's a good question. Let me look at this now. Different ideas, looking at quantum physics and this idea that there could be these branching timelines. I got interested in the work of Bernard Günther, who actually I had a falling out with many years ago. But, he has a website called Veil of Reality, where he talks about the hyperdimensional matrix control system. That Jacques Vallée, the ufologist, said that he believes the system is around us, that trans time as it transcends space. The system may well be able to locate itself in outer space, but its manifestations are not spacecraft in the ordinary nuts and bolts sense. UFOs are physical manifestations that cannot be understood apart from their psychic and symbolic reality. What we see in effect here is not an alien invention, it's a control system which acts on humans and uses humans. So then thinking, about, as I said, if there were, physicists believe there might be 10 dimensions of space-time, we are in a sense, the 4th dimension. I mean, this is just one way of explaining it. But, an entity in the 6th or 7th dimension would be able to cross through time as we cross through space. So maybe what we're experiencing from our, limited linear perspective is something that's actually being woven together by the intentions of all these higher dimensional beings.
Okay, back to you, Sasha.
Just, when I take somebody down into hypnosis and they're in their childhood and they're seeing and smelling and tasting and so forth, they're in a sense in a different time.
Oh, you break up. Say that again, honey.
An earlier time experiential time, or experience can be free of ordinary temporality, is what I'm saying. It's another experience. And when a person is regressed in hypnosis and they have a kinesthetic and auditory and taste, everything is just like they're there, that is, in a sense, a type of time travel. And the winners of any political contest always have a different, Trump and Ralph Nader have different histories. And it goes like that. And everybody lies. You read their myths, they're glorifying themselves and putting down the others. And so that's my experience anyhow.
So, Where do you want to go? We have another 10 minutes until we go to the break. What would you like to cover in this first hour, Daniel, about your books that you want our listeners to know about? What your research is about, what your discoveries are, your speculations.
It's actually, sorry, but it's actually so much easier for me if you just ask me questions, because there's so many different things. I don't really know. It's that's really the only way for me to really proceed in an interview.
Okay, I'm really most okay. I got I'm so interested in your identification with Quetzalcoatl. I think that he's like one of the smartest beings that ever was, and so I want to know what wisdom you, as if you put yourself in your Quetzalcoatl self, what you can tell us and the people that are listening that can help the situations we find ourselves in.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if that's, since I had that experience, I'm still quite skeptical and cautious, by nature. So I haven't really, gone around proclaiming myself as this or that. And in the book, I'm careful to explain that it was an experience that I had, and therefore, because I'm, try to be honest and truthful, I recount the experiences that I have, but I wasn't making any exaggerated claim for myself. This was just what came through in this transmission. And in fact, in the book, right. I even looked at, different transmissions that weren't, that didn't seem to be so true in the end. Whether it was Jose Arguelles, who said that, 2012 was going to be, this immediate transition into a noosphere, or Aleister Crowley, who believed he was going to be the great beast of the, apocalypse and so on. It's, a Jungian perspective is very helpful to understand that there are these archetypes in the collective psyche, and they constellate over time. But subjectively, when you kind of are confronted with this type of archetypal material, it can feel like overwhelmingly truthful and powerful. But, that's only your, fragment or your piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
So you have to be a little careful not to over-identify with it. Now having said all of that.
What would you get? Yes.
No, but
I know you thought about it.
Yeah.
If you were Thoth, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say that, reality is kind of like a dream projection from a higher dimensional matrix, and we all, have a larger existence, in a, other reality that this is just one, piece of. And so we're having this experience now, and there'll be other experiences that we have later. And, even if this is, like at this point, when I look at the, the ecological data and the fires in the Amazon and the destruction of the, forests in the Arctic by fire, it feels that this whole climate change thing is accelerating past the point of no return, as well as things like Fukushima, which we don't even, the Japanese don't have that under control at all. It's just an ongoing catastrophe. It feels like we're going to be shown, a very terrible lesson around the limits of our intellect and the limits of technology. And it may actually lead to the physical extinction of humanity, in the next, 20 to 50 years. But maybe even that is necessary for what Steiner talks about, the crossing of the threshold into the spiritual realms. And, for him, he, is one of my great, heroes, and I come down to his, back to his thought all the time. And once again, it's one articulation. I'm not saying that it's like the absolute answer, but his perspective is that, he said that the, reason that he came back to the earth, in the late 19th century was to bring the knowledge of reincarnation back to the modern West. And that not only did, individuals incarnate again and again, much as they talk about in Tibetan Buddhism and so on, but the earth itself, incarnates over and over again. And, he said this is currently the fourth incarnation of the earth, and the earth and humanity are very much wedded together. So when the earth reincarnates, it's really about humanity's evolution of consciousness at the same time. And in this, cycle, we have, four bodies, according to Steiner: the physical body, the astral body, the etheric body, and the I, or the ego. And, the I or the ego is still the newest body. That's the one we just attained, and it's still quite fragile and weak, and it's often falls prey to the forces of the astral, which manifest that kind of come through us as addictions and cravings and manias and so on, neuroses and so on. So we're actually learning to transform the astral dimension through our self-identity, our I. And as we do that over time, we're beginning to create what Steiner talked about as a new body, a fifth body, which he called the spirit self. And he believed that the next incarnation of the earth, in whatever form that takes, would actually be about the evolution of the spirit self and our development into these higher realms.
So we see our society, as we started this discussion, shifting to this focus on the extraterrestrial presence. And we don't really know what's true, what's fiction, what's made up, and perhaps doesn't matter. On some level, it just affects consciousness and affects our grand awakening. And if we're going to wipe ourselves out, then perhaps we need to reach beyond that to something outside of us, like technologies coming from extraterrestrials in order to fix and repair. So my communication with them is, and with other people, like I interact with a physicist, and he says, he was on the 20 and Back program. This is a story within a story. A lot of the experiencers say, yes, they were in a secret military, and they were exposed to these advanced technologies, and they're coming back with, we can fix all of it. The reason why it doesn't get fixed is because it's, these greedy corporations, and so perhaps that's what the Grand Awakening about is becoming conscious of the polarity of this society with the good and evil, light and dark, and standing up for it like we did in the 60s. We marched in the street. We were more active in the process, and we were very effective. And then, of course, we've got the punchback, the kickback from the other side. And so they made all our drugs illegal. We were waking up at high level, and everything became illegal. And we contracted back with 911. But we're going, we have to get pissed off enough and active enough. And like poor little Greta's, she's coming across the ocean in a boat, enduring that, and she's coming over to the Americas. And so we have to have our people that incarnate and inspire us to do something outside of this little box we're in, this matrix. It's an artificial constraint. So I think, I know it's not said that I said, but I think that I'm forever hopeful because I am an experiencer, and I've done, some work with psychedelics, and I've done tantra work. I think it's all possible, and we just have to wrap our minds around it and make it our priority and do it. And I think that's what's happening now. So you're going to go get active in it. I'm going to go get active in it, and people are getting really pissed off enough to get active in it. And with this through mindset, we're going to do things that are miraculous. That's my perception. I mean, we have to.
Well,
all the movies.
Yeah, I love that. I love that perspective, and of course, I hope you're right. But I think you brought up the movies, and that's an interesting thing because we've been kind of brought up on this kind of idea that at the last minute, the Mission Impossible, they defuse the bomb, or Star Wars, the last possible shot hits the center of the Death Star. So that's what we've been, kind of, taught in a way to anticipate or expect, and I certainly hope it goes that way, but it's also possible that, in this circumscribed reality, it doesn't go that way. And, we actually have to go through, a much more, difficult process. But I absolutely hope you're right. I hope that, the regenerative technologies get unleashed. And this is a lot of what I covered in my third book, How Soon Is Now. I was thinking about how, we could do a global shift to organic farming that would replenish the soil. We could rapidly move to renewable energy. In the same way in the Second World War, the U.S. undertook a massive wartime mobilization and was suddenly able to, kind of shift all of its factories to wartime production and tax the wealthy at 95% and use all that money for, the collective effort and so on. But, it's obviously harder in this case because in a way the enemy is everywhere. The enemy is omnipresent. I mean, we're the enemy because we're the ones who are eating the meat and taking the planes and driving the cars and so on, using the plastics. So it's a deeper and more difficult issue than having just a simple enemy like outside of ourselves. It's something that we've never really dealt with before. And I do think that it's one powerful way to look at our current situation is it is kind of a liminal zone, like liminality initiation is the zone, when you're undergoing the process of dismemberment, destruction, transformation, where, you can have transcendent experiences, but also terrifying ones and so on. That seems to be where we're at as a species right now.
That's right on. So we are all of it. We are all the above. And so World War II, our parents' generation, we had the external enemy. Go ahead, Sasha. The music's going to come on in 2 seconds. Go ahead.
It might be of value to think of the challenges that we have as perfect, and they're bringing out in us what we need to bring out due to the next level of transcendence where the challenges help us in our evolution.
Okay, we'll be back in 5 minutes. Enjoy the commercial break. We'll be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble.
Come
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix. I'm your host, Janet Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha. Alex Lessin, our producer, is Thomas Becker, who is known as a mad painter, and we're on Revolution Radio Studio B. Our guest is Daniel Pinchbeck. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on revolution.radio and please make your donation this week. We really need your donations. That's how we keep the network alive, and we can bring you all these shows like ours and the other 90-some hosts and hostesses that are out there as well. Any news to add, Thomas? Anything we need to tell our listeners about specials or where we are?
We are a little behind, so we'd appreciate if people would donate. And Hawk's still isn't any better. He's gotten a little worse, so. We really can't get any totals, but his wife said that we are behind. So
okay, so please be generous and donate. So, Dr. Lessin, are you back? Are you there, honey?
Yes, indeed, I am here, and I'm really, Daniel, what I'm really interested in is, because I know that you've immersed yourself in this material, is what is the government disclosing, and for each thing that it discloses, what's the thing that it's really hiding? And I think you can speculate on it better than most people because you've just been immersed in this material.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure you know about the work of like Richard Dolan.
Yeah, but tell.
Yeah, we know Richard.
I mean, he's probably the most, careful, conscientious historian who's researched this whole area. And I mean, he ends up thinking that there's a kind of there's been discoveries of alien technologies and alien craft. The government has some kind of secret space program. A lot of money has got into it. Technologies that, surpass what we now know have already been found. And maybe that certain factions in the government are making use of them. Now, once again, as I keep, restating, I don't know this for facts. And of course, it's possible that it's a massive disinformation effort for whatever reasons to make many people believe that something like this is true. But there does seem to be a lot of smoke here, and where there is so much smoke, there often is fire also.
Right. I always look at the lies. The lies tell us more than the truth sometimes. What are they making up? Where are they directing us? Where do they want us to go? Where do they want us not to go? I was stuck on.
Yeah, but I think you also need to be a little bit careful, because it's very easy to get into this conspiratorial mindset. It's very natural to humans, and in some weird way, it's very comforting to us to believe there's like a super organized, nefarious, human cabal that totally has control of the situation. What I argue in the book and in 2012 also is that, there are other forces underneath that work, and that includes these occult forces who may, these other dimensional archetypal forces that may have actually shaped, the situation to their advantage, because as we know, a lot of the alien abduction accounts, people talk about being trained by spaceships. They are sort of shown films where they see like this ecological disaster, and then they see hybrid aliens walking, around the Earth in a peaceful way once humans are gone from it. So they're sort of programming their human captives to think there's going to be this kind of ecological disaster event, and then the aliens are going to show up as the potential saviors and, take many people aboard the ships and take them away. But, there really is nothing about these aliens. They're more like some kind of like demon or some kind of, troll or something. They're goblin. They're definitely seem on the most part to be more on the despicable side than the helpful side. So if they're going to take us away, I definitely wouldn't get into one of those ships. I think would only go from bad to worse if you did.
I don't think you have a choice, from what I understand. Well, from my own experiences, you're just there. You find yourself on board ship, other planets, and interacting with other people. They even have you having sex with other people, other beings. It's just everything imagined and then some. It happens to experiencers.
Yeah. Underground
bases and my labs and secret space program. I've been doing this actively since right before 2012. For some 2012 around June, I think we started. And there are just thousands of stories. And so you look at it. It's like, are we being mind controlled? These things we start to put into our heads. Is it kind of like catching on because one person does it, another one? We don't know what's really going on. So you just look at the other levels, like, well, this is what's going on. So what is the collected story that's emerging? So before the break, we were talking about, we had this enemy that was outside of us in World War II. I was just writing my book, and my parents were both adults during World War II. My father fought in it. They were all traumatized from the war. The world was traumatized after World War II. My mother was traumatized from being raised in the Depression. There were no men when she was growing up. That generation, the next two generations, we had most of our strongest and best men were sent off to foreign wars and killed. So this trauma has been affecting our consciousness, but we did seem to emerge intact somewhat after World War II. If it would have continued, there were millions and millions more would have died. So what actually kind of saved us was a nuclear explosion, which could have been a nuclear holocaust and killed us. But that's now, 50, 60, 70 years later, that's now one of the threats is, nuclear. So it seems like as a collective that we survived that test and we created a collective outcome where we did survive. So maybe we've just graduated and it's going to be, more drama and trauma, but we're going to figure this out as well because now we've got the destruction of the whole planet through ecological disaster and, just look at all the factors. Every day when you listen to the news, it's just overwhelming. How do you know what's real? How do you know what's made up? Is it all fake news? Is it all conspiracy? Is it all real? Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. Anybody have any thoughts on that, Sasha or Daniel?
Well, one thing is that Richard Dolan did indeed show he followed the money, and that the people that had been dogging and writing all kinds of troll things on sites of people that were trying to disclose, even looking at official documents, there were paid professional guys from the military, from the CIA, that you could show there's this huge budget. And it included the Inquirer magazine to try to make it all look ridiculous. And so it seems that he has conclusively, from my perspective, shown that there are some things that have been done to discredit people who are trying to get information.
So what question do you have for Daniel?
That's not a question, but it's more like all these things point to the fact that whoever is being dissed must have something useful to say, that those who are trying to hide that person's message or obscure it or make it or trivialize it are hiding. And that's the kind of thing that when I get somebody like with a brain like yours, I want to know what your guesses are about what's behind who is making money off of these inventions? How does that work? How does that fit into the geopolitical situation on this planet? What's your take?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's see. I mean, I think also like, this is going to be a sort of more complex way of looking at it. But I, once again, it's like, one of the thinkers who I wrote about in the Occult Control System, whose work I really, really love, is Patrick Harper, who wrote a book called The Philosopher's Secret Fire, and about the alchemical imagination and so on. And he talks about how in our Western modern rational way of being and thinking, we live in a very, very dualistic vision of reality, where things are either real or fake, or they're true or not true. And it may be that there are actually things that hover on the boundary between real and fake, or there may be layers of kind of indeterminacy. Nietzsche was a philosopher who talked about how even cause and effect may be something that's a construct of the human mind. So for me, I sort of look at these things phenomenologically in that they're kind of these edge experience, edge realm ideas and edge realm possibilities, and they're kind of emerging over time, more and more into the mainstream of thought and discourse. And we'll see where that leads, but I think ultimately, for instance, Carl Jung, was less interested in the literal reality of the flying saucers and more in their mythological or mythopoetical or archetypal reality. And he believed that they were, revealing to us, kind of the process of, apocalypse or unveiling, which for him and for Jungians is, a psychic event primarily, which, they talk about as the coming of the self, into conscious realization. So it's the integration of all these different, the shadows and the lights and so on. Our capacity to hold all of it in the kind of balance, and not get trapped into different dualisms, but recognizing that there are these different polarities that aren't necessarily opposed and so on. So I think, once again, it's very difficult to try to get to a somewhat subtler or more nuanced way of thinking about the nature of reality, and to sort of get beyond the question of who's making the money and, what's this and who's got the alien technology, but to really think of it more as something that's kind of an emergent property of the evolution of consciousness that then leads into these different, realms of potentiality or possibility,
Thank you. Yes.
You have anything else to say, Sasha, or add? I was going to add something.
I would say that back in the Sumerian literature, written in Akkadian and translated by my teacher Sitchin, he says after the radiation from the nuking of the Sinai spaceport and the lower half of the Salt Sea, which became the Dead Sea, there was a cloud of radiation that blew northward. It missed Basra, where Prince Marduk had his place. He was the target, and it blew over all of Sumer and killed Ur. It killed Uruk. It killed all the cities except Enki had made fallout shelters, and Marduk had too. And then afterwards, Enki came back, it says, and he was able to clean up the radiation and resettle on Iraq. And so that we also know the Israelis have the technology, and so does Kishi, that radiation can be cleared up.
Well, how do you deal with the pushback from mainstream archaeologists who kind of believe that Sitchin's kind of interpretations of the Sumerian, were very kind of eccentric?
That's a really good question. I cut at it with Occam's razor, and I say, what kind of predictions come from this formulation by the Sitchin, and what would confirm it, and what would tend to make it less likely? And then I gather data, and so I regard all intellectual and mathematical systems as merely maps anyhow. And so when he says that you can a moon of Nibiru hit the Pacific Basin and gouge out things and things, and okay, well, if that's the case, the mantle under the Pacific should be more shallow, and it should consist of sand and volcanics that covered it rather than the original mantle. And you can then test the floor of the Pacific Basin and see if that's so enough. I deal with any kind of material, but as an anthropologist, what we do is we don't assume that our people are saying things are stupid. They are explaining things in symbols that mean something to them, and we give them the phenomenological okay to say, in this reality, okay, what can you predict, and what would show you that your predictions are not well-founded, that's all.
So we're looking at all these belief systems, and one of the experiencers from Australia, his name is George Cavasilis. He says that he was told this by extraterrestrials. So we just look at these things, right? And he says that we currently exist on all levels. So you were mentioning earlier about Sophia was going to experience her fourth incarnation as an Earth being, but his theory is that we simultaneously exist on many multidimensional levels, planes, existences, vibratory frequencies in many forms, many fractals, and so we have a planetary level of ourselves. So if you can access Gaia Sophia, and become her and identify with her, she's in a symbiotic relationship with these creatures, human beings, and perhaps even Bigfoot, or there might be some inner Earth beings. We don't know. We think we're the only intelligent species, maybe the dolphins, maybe the whales, but, she wants us to join with her and love this planet and love all the different species and diversity. So maybe, we're activating ourselves at all the different levels in between, from the smallest level and the insect level all the way up to the planetary level.
Yeah, beautiful. No, I really appreciate your optimistic, redemptive vision of what's possible here. And and that's also something that, I believe we have a lot to learn from these indigenous cultures and communities that I've had an opportunity, to visit, whether it's the Kogi in Colombia or the Hopi in Arizona, or the Sequoia, the Shipibo in the Amazon basin, or the Bwiti in Gabon. That's also very much, subject of this other book that we've just published, When Plants Dream, which is about the global spread of ayahuasca, and really looking at how these, indigenous cultures have preserved this use of this medicine, and the mestizo cultures adopted it, and it changed a bit. They since they'd been brought up Christian, they created religions that use ayahuasca as the sacrament, much like the wine in church, but in this case it actually has a direct missionary effect. And how from there the medicine traveled out into the modern world, and now it's really flowing everywhere. I mean, there's ayahuasca communities in Japan and South Africa and across Europe and India and so on. So the ayahuasca, for indigenous people is like a great teacher. It's like the source of their, mythologies and so on. So, it really feels like part of what's happening in our time is this melding of the postmodern and the technological with the ancient and indigenous and traditional.
Right.
Go ahead,
it's
interesting. I find it really interesting. When I imagine you, Daniel, is that you get to travel all over. You write books. You work for the New York Times. You have a wife that you travel with. I don't think that things are all that bad. I think this is in your head, maybe. I think maybe you're happy.
Yeah, no, I definitely have a wonderful, very rich life, and feel a lot of gratitude, to the universe for putting me in this, particular position. But at the same time, and maybe we're going to escape Houdini-like, but there's no doubt that what's happening. We're losing, something like 100, 150 species a day. 75% of the insects are gone in the last 30 years. There's a lot of very, frightening statistics around fresh water, around what's going to happen to farming and so on. And we're already seeing, for instance, the Syrian refugee crisis is very much related to climate change and, depletion of natural resources, water. It's a drought there that created these huge refugees, and, the refugees then scare governments in Europe and the U.S., who then turn more towards the right wing and more authoritarian in their, tendencies, to the point where, what's happening on the border of Mexico here with these children and so on. So, once again, it's like the modern, the Anglo-European world really has to even go further into stepping into their, moral responsibility for, these things that they've unleashed around the planet.
Right. It seems like it's polarizing. The polarity is expanding, and things are getting more and more negative, and more people are aligning with the negative. So let's maybe crank it up. So imagine we go there. Are we really going to go where we destroy everything? There's some of these time traveler stories, and they say by 2050, all human life is gone, and by 2100, all life is gone from the planet. So this is one of these timelines you can go down in your imagination and you just go there. And it's like, I don't know. When I go there, it's like I just can't believe that we're not going to do something different. Because we're an intelligent species. It's just that there's some part of us that's creating this, and there's another part of us that wants to prevent it. So we're not motivated enough. We just haven't gotten behind it enough. So on some level, we're pushing this darkness out to the very end. And so the worst case scenario, we do die. The planet won't the planet be better without us? I think life will come back. Or maybe it's just a cinder. Or maybe that's what happens in the universe. Intelligent species go and seed planets and they just push it and they extinct. What do you both think about that? I mean, I can't believe that we're going to do it. I just can't believe we're going to kill ourselves off. What do you?
I think the best strategy is what we call in existentialism, intentionality. Consciously or unconsciously, if you assume, it's not so true, but if you assume that you created the situation as you perceive it for your own growth and the growth of humanity, perhaps, then you get to enjoy the present, and that's really the secret from my perspective. If you're in the now and you're alive and you're enjoying your life and sharing and doing what you can about the challenges and alleviating the pain of other people, then that it's the path that you walk rather than the end that you reach. And so that's all you've really got is right now. So enjoy it. That's what I suggest.
Okay. So Daniel, is there a part of consciousness you think that wants to destroy itself? Is that part of this, or do you think that we're totally subject to this arcanic force and that they're making us destroy it? Can an outside force really make us destroy ourselves, or are we just wanting that to happen? Maybe that's how we become enlightened, is we have to go and experience death as an individual and as a species or as a planet to evolve to the next highest level. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, consciousness, I mean, one idea of, talk about, God being kind of this infinite consciousness, and as that infinite consciousness, it's exploring, God is exploring all of its creative capacities, using, conscious beings like ourselves to test out and discover, everything that it can do. And therefore it's going to go all the way to the negative and all the way to the positive, but hopefully the positive is ultimately the predominant. I mean, that's definitely the message most people get from transpersonal or transcendent experiences.
Right. Because apparently for those who experience, going on the other side, they die, they have near-death experiences, they come back. People remember past lives. It's that wherever we go, there we are. We do continue to exist. And this human form, has been a very popular model for, millions, if not billions of years. And apparently, according to the biologists, this humanoid form exists throughout the cosmos, one of the major dominant forms, which still come in and experience life. So one of the theories is that they're they have samples, just like they kept the seeds during the flood. Apparently they had things in chambers, and so after the flood they were able to replant and repopulate. And if you think about how few people remained, I don't think there was just 2 people after the flood, but there was a small population. In very short order, we were able to replenish the earth. So apparently, what was it, the period of the flood, honey? Was that what year?
13,000 years ago.
Yeah. And so that was absolute devastation. And it apparently has come back even more. So maybe under the seeds of under the Amazon rainforest being burned down, there are seeds for the next generation of plants. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's, speculation. I don't know exactly. I mean, as I said, I like your optimism and, really appreciate, that you have that kind of, positive perspective, Yeah.
Well, I figure if we can wrap our head around it, we can do it. If we're always going into the negative and we're going, woe is me, and we're just helpless and we're all doing it, then we don't have the motivation to do something. But we're a very innovative species. If we can wrap our heads around it, if we can imagine it, if we can image it. One of the stories in the extraterrestrial literature is that the reason why they are so fascinated with human beings is because we have imagination. A lot of the older species, like the Greys, they don't have the imagination like human beings do. And so when we image things, we're actually able to take it from non-physical realms into physicality. And, some people need to make a model first, but some people like Tesla could just image it and then create it, right? So apparently this is unique among the cosmos, and we can image things, imagine, and create things. So that's why I keep pulling it into positive. Not that I'm worried about, if we die, we die, right? I mean, we've died before. But I just keep, and people get mad at me. They go, yeah, you're so positive. Well, I interact with the positive side of the continuum, and as an extraterrestrial experiencer, I'm going to these meetings on a cosmic level. And the reason why they haven't done a full intervention is that we haven't maximized the polarity in our potential creation, right? So they're going to come in and they're not going to let us extinct the human species. And I don't think the Earth will, my experience of catastrophe like it did with the flood, although there was a promise, if you look at the biblical lore, that we're not going to allow humanity to perish like that again. So, but wherever I look at it, it's like there's something going on here. It's in our science fiction. It's in like Star Trek. It's in our lore. There's always that thing, that miracle, and somehow humanity needs to get inspired enough to get off their butts and do something about it. And I think that's why we have the heroes. It's like the myth of the hero. Who is that? Campbell, right? Campbell's myth. When do you get inspired to get off when do you become Bilbo? When do you get off your dump and go and do the adventure? And so I think we're being called to action. It's time to do something.
Yeah,
and do it out of love. Yeah.
As I mentioned, my last book, How Soon Is Now, was, really an effort to kind of put together what would be like the big strategic game plan if we did want to address this crisis properly. And as I mentioned, it involves, global transition back to organic farming, reduction or even temporary elimination of meat eating. We have to put, one problem is that we're very, very now obsessed with our individuality and our individual freedoms. And I think one reason that the ecological crisis scares so many people is that intuitively know it's going to curtail some of the, if we were to really, really accept the severity of it and really try to face it, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that we're doing now. And a lot of those things are really rooted in the economic system, which is inherently problematic. Essentially, you could look at the stock market as like a game that humans created. And, for the game, we created artificial life forms that we call corporations. And we put them into the stock market game. And we said that there's really one rule, that those corporations have to maximize short-term profit and shareholder value. That's how they win the game. So then the corporations went ahead and did that. But then when you have to deal with environmental regulations or restrictions, those are costly. So innately corporations will try to buy lobbyists or, go corrupt and circumvent, environmental restrictions or laws. And that leads to things like the, British petroleum spill in the Gulf of Mexico and so on. So, we have a problem where corporations are forced to maximize financial value. And that also, capitalism then requires constant new products, whether it's a new smartphone every year or new clothing, when the hemlines change, so we have to get new dresses and so on. It's all a way to keep us, locked into this capitalist machine, which made total sense 100 years ago when we were still exploring, where we had frontiers, where we didn't know how big the world is, or we kind of assumed that it was, an infinite resource. And unfortunately, economists often still make that kind of assumption today in their projections. But actually, what we're actually learning is the opposite, that the Earth system is very complex, very intricate, very interconnected, easily, can be easily perturbed or disturbed. And once it goes into a different state out of the steady state, that can be very, very chaotic and lead to, really extreme dislocations, which is something that researchers have, found in past epochs of time.
Sasha,
well, it's a brilliant analysis. You're right on, totally in every way. If you could face those things honestly, you'd move back from the coast. George Washington lost the Battle of New York because the British could sail right into New York, while the waters can come right in the same way. And all you have to do is start zoning intelligence. Not all you have to do, but it would help to be realistic about sea rise level and prepare for it with zoning and making houses to be on higher stuff, not just do levees, and the southern Delta area is too blub, blub, blub. Forget it. Move back to the high ground.
Well, I think that's what we're experiencing now. We finally have some people, with the new politics and everything happening so fast every day, we finally have people looking at all of our systems, and it appears that most of them are broken. So we're going to start seeing new paradigms emerge because they're just not, serving humanity anymore. It's out of necessity. So it's like a perturbation is emerging out of the chaos. We'll new higher and better order. Mm-hmm. So, I'm kind of excited about it, but it is nerve-wracking. It is kind of like watching, Star Trek, and they've launched the self-destruct button. We're in a 10-minute countdown. Are we going to succeed or not? Maybe it doesn't really matter at the highest level, but I'm in the human game, and what can I do? What can we do personally to motivate people to start thinking solution-based and, acting more consciously? So if it's something like going to one of Greta's marches this weekend, you might, or next couple of months, I guess they're doing it, you might be inspired in putting our minds together. We didn't really solve all the major problems of the world individually. We put our minds together with other people, and we built one upon the other. And so we did a lot of miracles. Apparently that imitation game, the Allies were going to lose it because the Nazis had this technology, which appears, in looking at it, this kind of alien technology. They could change the code, and it was beyond normal mental capabilities calculated. So they were forced to invent a computer where there were no computers, and they had to do it within a short time frame, or everybody would have, masses of people would have died. So they apparently took about 2 years, but they did it in the nick of time. So we see these imagined stories and then these real stories of how we've done this individually and collectively. So anyway, I keep saying the same thing over again, but and that's what I do on the shows, is like, what can we do? What are these solutions? So I'm interested in what you were mentioning, but it seems like it takes more than just talking about it. It takes humanity having a disaster before they finally act. We've become too complacent, and our heads are buried in our computers and in our phones. But if you notice, people aren't buying new iPhones. There's no reason. It's kind of like that maxed out. I think I'll keep my iPhone 7 or 8 for a while. It seems fine. I'm not rushing out to buy the 11 or whatever it is this time. So, okay. Sasha, back to you.
I think what we are not addressing is the essential criminality of our government in standing down for the Twin Towers and using that as a pretext to kill Iraqis and take away our freedoms in the Patriot Act. And I think that's the elephant in the room, that there's illegal criminal activities at the highest levels of government involving kidnapping and killing people.
Well, I mean, the government, America has been, in some ways, look at the, was it the Constitution where, African people were seen as 3/5 of a person compared to white people, where Native people were not seen as people at all. They were just, kind of occupying land that we had the right to own, and, we committed a lot of, destruction on their cultures, which were, in some ways very evolved cultures compared to ours. I mean, it's, in a way, it's just what we're seeing now is the kind of obvious continuation of a long history of exploitation and domination, for the benefit of the small, wealthy group.
Right.
On.
When we go back into the Sitchin story and the Anunnaki, and who is this group that thinks that they're so important that we're less than they are? And so it's interesting to take it back to the historical. So they are the archons. They are the other species.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know, but it also happens automatically. I mean, as soon as somebody, becomes a star or gets a lot of money, the human ego immediately, inflates, and you can't imagine that's just luck that came to you. So you create this narrative that tells you that you're special, and then you deserve more than other people. It's very innate to the human psyche, and that's why, a lot of these indigenous cultures were really designed to not allow for kind of power relationships and hierarchies. They organize themselves differently. Even chiefs were never really, like in Amazonian societies, they couldn't really order people to go into battle or order people to do anything. The chief was actually the mediator, the one who, was best able to hear the different voices of a story and make a good decision for the community, or have the best knowledge of the plants and and so on. So yeah, I mean, the type of we really have a culture that's based on indoctrination, which happens through the media and through the education system. The reason that we send kids to school for so long and they have to be constrained in these little desks listening to these teachers, has as much to do with getting people to accept relationships of hierarchy and domination as it does with educating in any particular subject. So the whole society is really structured around control and domination, in many ways.
I agree. Dominator consciousness is the number one principle of the Anunnaki. They would kill their own brothers, sisters, kids, just to be the dog on top. And, and men have been pushing down women, and there's been slavery from the get-go. And domination, hierarchy is exactly the problem. And I totally concur with your analysis. We've got to simultaneously be able to feel our individuality and our collective coherent field with other people. We need to have both, for heaven's sake. That's what's being a sentient human beings about.
Well, in the Anunnaki story, the first generation hybrid human Anunnakis they created, they just went back to the field. I mean, went back to the jungles and the forests, and they wouldn't work. So they had to do some further introduction of these genes, these genetics, so that they would be more easily programmed, and that they would be oriented towards working and following directions. So this is if you follow the literature, we have been, created to be that way, less independent and more easily manipulated and controlled. But then there's a continual manipulation. That's what we look about in the, we look at the conspiracy stuff. We look at the myriad program. We look at how are they training us to just be we the sheep, to follow orders, to follow directions. So I was looking at the programs that that my mother put me in front of the TV, and I watched like Romper Room, and they were saying that was part of my labs, that you were just starting to be trained to follow orders, right? Follow orders, follow directions. Do what the doobie says to do. And all these programs have been conditioning us from moment one to be good little followers. But now there's something that's happening where people are being trained to be assassins and go out. So I guess they're upping the terror. Let's go kill everybody. What do you think's going on there? Is that because of the psychotropics that are out there?
So, guys, I have a question. Do we actually have to go the full 2 hours? Because unfortunately, I broke my leg a month and a half ago. And it's kind of like I'm still recuperating from it, and it would be kind of nice for me just to like take care of that right now.
Oh,
so,
sorry about your leg.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. It was really nice chatting with you, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. But if you don't mind, I'd love to like sign off for tonight and let you guys just maybe finish this one.
Okay.
Just say your website.
Do you have any
one more
final
time.
words?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
well, my most recent books are, When Plants Dream, which is on ayahuasca and how it's spreading around the world and its effects that it's having. And I co-wrote that with a woman anthropologist, Sophia Rocklin. And the main book we've been talking about is called The Occult Control System, which was an effort to kind of shed some light on what's happening with the UFOs and the alien abduction stories and putting it in a larger context. My website is pinchbeck.io. I can be found on Twitter as Daniel Pinchbeck, DanielPinchbeck. Instagram the same, Facebook the same. And thank you so much for making this time for me tonight. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and take care of yourself. And we're sorry that you broke your leg, but glad you're recovering. Okay,
thank you so much. Have a good night.
So much.
Bye.
Aloha, blessings.
Aloha.
So,
Janet, if I may, I'd like to share something with our listeners. We've been dealing with what we call the other sphere, the non-ordinary, non-everyday stuff. And it's really interesting because we can all access that. We talk about people that we know that died. Their spirits can still be accessed. If you've had an experience on being in a contact with an extraterrestrial, you can expand that experience. You can take a dream that you had or daydream and really understand how it's showing you pictures of yourself and the whole universe at the same time. All of that's possible. And all you have to do is just imagine. You could even do this right now if you're not driving the car. Imagine that you're seated in a holo room, one where things are so real. It's so real you can feel things and smell them and taste them, and it's just like you're there. So imagine that you're in this holo room, and you want to push a button that will take you to an experience that would be of value to you in your life. You could push a button that will make a hologram of a past life you had, or a future life, or an encounter with an extraterrestrial, or or you can see what happens to you after you die. Whatever, it's all there. So just imagine, if you would, that you're sitting in this holo chair, and first you relax. And the way you relax to make it really work is you close your eyes now. If you're not driving the car, close your eyes and relax. With each breath, let yourself relax even more deeply, going down into a deep state, and now pushing a button which will take you to an experience, perhaps of something that happened in your childhood, or perhaps you'll see somebody that's already departed, and see what you get. Just see what you get. And what you can do is you can be there and have the whole experience just the way it was, and you can even reprogram it and make up another way it could be. And don't do it right now because the show's almost over. But do it on your own, and call a mad painter and let him know how it turned out.
And I wanted to, Matt, are you there? What did you want to add to our conversation tonight? Are you there?
Kinda.
Say any comments, any feedback? You're kind of here.
I'm dealing with some host problems too in the back.
Oh shoot. We have problems on Revolution Radio.
Regular painting place around here.
Yeah, so were you paying attention to the conversation? I know you have. We were talking in the break about the AI and everything, so I know you have.
I think it's one of our greatest threats.
Is AI. What do you think they're going to do?
I think they're already doing it.
Yes, they're already doing it. The Internet of Things is going to be, everything tracks you and can feed you just what it wants.
Just think of it. We'll be so taken care of. We won't even have to get up and go to the bathroom. They'll bring the toilet to us.
And
they'll feed us. What's that?
The toilet will be your doctor every day.
Oh, yeah. It'll analyze all your...
It'll analyze everything, tell you get too fat.
You need more of this and less that, and then it'll make the food for you and feed it
in 1984, the television said, Citizen Smith, reach your toes. You can stretch further.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we were reading about that. Was that an article or?
Yeah, in the Economist
NPR or something.
No, in the Economist they have
this.
The main article is called "The Internet of Things," and every device in your car, in your house, will be voice activated, and it's all coordinated. And your car can say how long it's going to be till it gets home, and tell the stove to start cooking things, in the refrigerator, and make the heat, and all this stuff. And it can also be used to exploit you, like anything else. And the problem is, it's already here. They can tell if you're using so much electricity at a certain night, you might have a grow room in a city that doesn't allow marijuana and come bust you.
See, we created a monster. So it's already too late. So why did we do that? I guess we got carried away with.
I know. I think that Daniel's analysis was right. It's because things are all run by corporations that make money, and that's they can't help it. That's what they are. That's what they do, and it sucks.
Well, they're taking away jobs, so we won't be a job-based economy anymore. So we're going to be a consumer-based economy. So I think Andrew Yang's right on. We're going to end up having either that, or we're going to starve everybody to death. But they need people. They need consumers. They need the receivers of the end product or service. So if they're taking away all the jobs or automating all the jobs, maybe that's something to celebrate. We won't have to do menial jobs. We won't have to pick up trash anymore, scrub toilets.
Okay,
all the toilets will be self-scrubbing.
What the Economist says is that it's not putting McDonald's workers out of a job, because it's cheaper to hire people at the substandard wages and then to buy machines, and so that's it's just economics, because they're thinking of in these stupid terms of making money.
Right. Was that you, Matt, that said that you went to McDonald's that was automated?
Oh, no. I don't eat at McDonald's.
Someone said they went to one.
I want real hamburgers.
I forget who said that. They said they went to one of them, and it was really creepy, and so it only lasted a few weeks because nobody wanted to go to it anymore. It was too creepy. It was a novelty at first, and then it was just too creepy. There was only one guy in the whole store, and he was just making sure all the equipment. So it's doable. It's totally doable to make all. I mean, I'm talking about Jack in the Box alone. It's doable to make all that automated.
The ones that get automated are the attorneys and doctors, and they just, they don't need. You don't need an attorney. It's going to choose which papers.
It's the clerical ones that are going to have the problem now.
Yeah. Oh, and also the retailers. Forget about retail. Everything's coming through Amazon.
Well, yeah, or robotic cashiers.
Yeah. Oh, that's awful.
They got them in Japan in some of the stores. Stores empty of people and salesmen, just a cashier there, a robotic cashier, and everything's filmed, So.
The problem is there's robotic assassins. We saw it on the television.
Yeah, but you won't have to go out anymore. You won't have to be risk of being targeted. You won't have to go to. So if they automate the houses and then you realize you're low on milk or something, then the store will automatically fulfill it and put it into the automated car, and it will drive it to your or the drone will drive it to your place and drop it off. And nobody will have to. That was the story of iRobot, the original iRobot by Isaac Asimov. They read it in 1962 or 63. No one left their houses anymore. There was no reason to go anywhere because everything. Yeah. So, well, I don't know. We probably won't live a lot long enough to see it reach the full potential. But welcome to the future.
Oh, you can't stop it.
Yeah, a lot of people. The ones that really worry Pence and those guys are the sex robots. Pence is afraid of them.
Got less than a minute.
Less than a minute. Okay, well, we want to thank everybody for joining our crazy show. I'm Janet Lessin. Our main show is aquarianradio.com. We've got Enki Speaks, ENKISPEAKS.com. And if you want to write to us, aquarianradio@gmail.com. And we're always looking for new, interesting people to interview. So just contact us, and we'd love to talk to you. So say aloha, honey.
Make aloha.
Aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
On the go? Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons. Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, your carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter.